All right, coming back together. Hopefully people have their topics. So how about an example? So what are you all what are you teaching? Yep.
So yeah, we're going to do an introduction to the resuscitation day for interns.
Okay.
Coming up in July. So I guess so far, like I want them to know where things are, like the names of tools, and like how to call for medications. And,
Good.
I mean, that's all very basic, but yeah.
Yeah. Let's try yours, because this is like out of the box. I love it.
I have been tasked with teaching all residents about financial literacy next month. Finance person for our department. So the main things I want them to learn are how to make a budget and why this is important, and then about compound interest, like how that works. And it's easy to do a nice illustration that really boggles people's minds. Like if you put away $1,000 now, it can grow versus waiting till later to think about retirement.
Yeah.
So a starter.
And so if you're doing a topic that's way away from what we normally, it's what you normally do, but not what we normally do, that's where you actually want to fall back. Curran is the guy who wrote the book, I don't know, it's Curran and I don't know who the other people are, but it's basically the steps to curriculum development. It's a fat or skinny book, don't read it. But the main thing in Curran's that's probably the most important is do a needs assessment. And so kind of asking something, what do you feel like? I mean, actually, what do you need to know about financial literacy? Because he and I are kind of we're thinking about how much money do I need to retire, right? And you're probably thinking about, oh my God, my loans, right? Is that the needs assessment actually depends on who's in the room. And so thinking about that is going to be important. So make sure that you're doing a needs assessment in some format to get people what they need to know, right? Cool. All right, that method was a think, pair, share. So we'll be calling out the methods as we go through, but that's called think, pair, share. And it does, and so when would we use the think, pair, share? What was the purpose of that one? When would you choose to use the think, pair, share? We need a sounding board, yeah. If you remember the whole thing of the triangle, let me just go back. If you go back to this, if you go back to Meg's triangle here, what level were we on? Oh, sorry. For think, pair, share. You're definitely, so you're at SAE, really, right? And you may actually be, she's teaching us about financial literacy, so right? And so you're actually relatively high in the pyramid. And so that would be one of the purposes to do this, is that you're actually getting them to a much higher spot. Okay, good. So then the next step in Wiggins and McTeague is determine the evidence. And we're not going to, how do you know that they learned, and determine what the evidence is. And that's one you can basically you're trying to say, how do we actually know that they learned this? And so as a good educator, you want to be assuring that they have learned. We're not going to go into a lot of detail here, but you might do it through multiple choice questions, you might do it through conversation, you might do it through small group work. But you want to be thinking about how are you going to know that they learned it. And then the final thing is planning the learning experiences and the instruction. And for this one, I actually just put this back in to remind people that if you're trying to teach somebody something, you want them to be engaging. And so particularly with financial literacy, that one's going to be a hard one because they're going to have a hard time doing it. But doing something that is engaging them in the process will help them learn it better. And so think about that as you work forward in this process. It's important as you do it to recognize how people learn. So there's a number of books of how people learn, and Rob was talking about one called Pauses or something like that. But what we know about the way people learn is that you take whatever information is, and that's up front, and that's in your working memory. Do people know approximately how many pieces can you hold in your working memory? What? Depends if it's coffee. How many? So five probably, and it's probably 4 to 6 or so. So it's generally around 5. So you can hold about 5 things in your working memory, and the purpose is that you then want to transfer that into long-term memory. And the way that you get that is by trying to do things that make it sticky. And so you're trying to get your working memory into your long-term memory, which means that it's organized and you can pull it back out. There's a couple of tricks with this, and you'll be seeing us do this throughout the day. The first one is what I like to call is how do you make things sticky? And so all of that pyramid that we talked about, the things at the bottom are sticky because you're using the material, you're thinking about it, you're integrating it, you're talking to other people. That's going to make it sticky. And so other ways to make it sticky, and you'll see these two guys in the back as they come forward, they're going to be doing things to try to get you to remember the things that they're doing in more of a lecture presentation. So you might use images, you might use emotions, you might have people doing things. That's the piece of getting it sticky. The other piece of the memory is that you've got to have constant retrieval. And so you see that I've now gone back to the learning period 3 times. That means that you're going to be much more likely to remember the learning period, the learning pyramid. I also asked you to use it, like what level are we? All of those things, by returning to things and making people use them, is the way that you make it sticky so that you remember. And so those are just some tips and tricks for trying to, hopefully, that when people walk out of here, they have learned something and that they remember it. Otherwise, it doesn't do as much good. These guys laugh at me about the metacognitive onion. What I talk about the metacognitive onion is you will watch me layer on top of layer. Like we had to do the gallery walk, and then we actually deconstructed the gallery walk and said, why does this work? And then we have you do something else, and we describe it. So we do it, we describe it, we then say why it works and when you might use it. And so those are just kind of the layers of the onion. And it's so that you can take away what we're doing today and then be able to use it in your practice. And so that's the onion. All right, what other kinds of breaks? We're done with time. We're good on, actually, we should probably stop. So we're actually going to move into something called a jigsaw. But I think that a lot of us are teaching in the student lecture space, and so the 4-hour block is really kind of rough. And so think about some of these opportunities to do educational breaks as you think about teaching residents or students, because I think we really just kind of lose track of things. And so the educational breaks are simply what we did with the gallery walk, and then we'll go through a bunch of other different kinds of educational breaks along the way.